Yeah, hi, I'm Joel Kahn. I'm a medical doctor and I specialize in cardiology, heart disease. I've been doing that since 1990, so this is my 33rd year in practice and 10 years of training before that. I'm a clinical professor at the largest medical school in the United States here in Detroit, Wayne State University School of Medicine. And I have my own clinic, a preventive plant-based clinic called the Kahn Center for Cardiac Longevity in suburban Detroit. I went plant-based in 1977. That is a lot of years ago, 45-ish years ago. I was observing Jewish dietary laws called keeping kosher. I went up to Ann Arbor, Michigan, University of Michigan, a couple days in the dorm cafeteria. I said, I don't eat that stuff. And there's an amazing salad bar. They actually did have an amazing salad bar. Just started every day, eating oatmeal in the morning and salad bar lunch and dinner. Pretty much worked quickly. And by coincidence, my parents, who were healthy eaters, but by no means vegan, went to the Pritikin Center at that time in Santa Monica, California, all at the same time. And I started coming home on the weekend now and then, and instead of a meatloaf, there was a lentil loaf. And I said, that's crazy. I'm eating salad bar during the day at university and lentil loaf at home on the weekend. And that was 1977. It took a few years to read a book like John Robbins' Diet for a New America when it came out. And I thought, I can't believe there's so much data here that I didn't know about. I was deep in med school, deep in residency, studying what I needed to study. And the real kicker, just to tell you the last little piece, I can remember to the day, my first job out of training, out of fellowship, was back in Ann Arbor, Michigan. I had been out of state for 4 years. And about 3 weeks into my job, July 21, 1990, I went to the mailbox, I got the mail. There were my medical journals, because at the time there was no internet. And there was a journal called Lancet, and there was an article in there that you could potentially reverse heart disease using a lifestyle centered around a plant-based diet. And I read that article 10 times. I mean, I really couldn't believe that I'd never heard even a shred about this in medical school residency, cardiology fellowship, advanced cardiology fellowship. Well, that was a famous article by Dr. Dean Ornish. I quickly got his book that came out in 1990 and really set me on a path. So literally, every patient I've seen in practice in 33 years has heard about plant-based nutrition, one way or another, a book, a video, an article, one of my books, but they all know that it's the special sauce to preventing and reversing multitude of diseases, but we talk about heart disease the most.
Now, do you think that eating a varied whole food, plant-exclusive diet is the most protective against heart disease?
I discuss with my patients their ideal diet. It's all over my office. If you walk in my office, there's 200 books in the waiting room, 100 books in my office. There's posters, there's educational pieces. Patients typically leave with medical articles or articles I've written on my clinic blog site. And we talk about nutrition, and I always emphasize them from literally head to toe, from brain health all the way down to circulation to their feet and every organ in between. The science. I am a clinical professor at a medical school. I'm supposed to stick to science. And at the present time, I don't sell broccoli, I don't sell asparagus, I just make recommendations based on the science. The strongest science supports a whole food, plant-based diet, exclusively or nearly exclusively. There's that last little bit, 2 or 3 meals a week that we can argue about. I choose to eat exclusively whole food, plant-based, high quality, largely organic, brightly colored, a rainbow diet of pretty colors every day. And that's what I teach my patients, but I'm also very straightforward with them. We can detect any potential weakness that might come out of any diet, whether it's an all-meat diet, whether it's a Paleolithic diet, whether it's a Mediterranean diet, whether it's, God forbid, the standard American CRAP, calorie-rich and processed crap diet, and even a whole food plant-based diet. Are you getting enough vitamin D, iodine, omega-3, selenium, vitamin K, magnesium? These are all easily testable items, and I run an advanced clinic. So I make sure that even on a whole food plant-based diet, that we're getting enough ground flaxseed and enough chia seeds and hemp hearts, walnuts, leafy greens to get that omega-3, and mushrooms for vitamin D. But we do sometimes use easy-to-use supplements I take myself because my blood levels are just on target, and I don't believe in guessing. In fact, I use this little hashtag test, not guess. Whatever diet you're adopting, you'll find nutritional deficiencies are possible. You may not have them. And they're so easy to correct. Why not have a supercharged optimal diet, and just hit a home run out of the park.
What are the easiest, most practical ways for somebody to test, not guess, like the general population that might benefit from this?
Yeah, lots of people who've adopted a whole food plant-based diet have taken a simple path of just adding vitamin B12, maybe every day, maybe a few times a week, maybe even once a week. And a lot of people do really well, there's no doubt. When you really start to do testing, you can find that there may be a few nutritional deficiencies beyond B12 that we're at risk for. But so is the rest of the public. This is nothing unique to the vegan community. Give me a community of meat eaters and I'll show you a community that's very low in omega-3 fatty acids. So important for the brain. So people can order their own blood work if they want to. There's companies out there. You can go to big labs, but then you'll need a doctor's order like Quest or LabCorp or a major hospital and get all these things run. You might want to find a dietitian or a nutritional consultant or a physician extender that is schooled in nutrition, and you can run these panels. I'm blown away how often they're grossly abnormal. And I'm just talking across the board, not just my very large vegan population of heart patients, but my general patients. They're just crazy deficient. And really, one of the easiest things to do is correct that horrible omega-3 level or that B12 deficiency or that iodine deficiency or selenium deficiency or zinc deficiency or copper deficiency. And really, a lot of things correct right after. And then usually just Action Point is a multivitamin geared for plant-based eaters that plug a few of the holes. Not everybody has the holes, but if you test, you see a lot of them.
Aren't the RDAs more designed toward a normal population? It's less likely to be similar or maybe the same needs that a vegan might have?
Yeah, the governmental RDAs are minimums to avoid disease. And we stress, at least in my cardiology clinic, optimal health, not just avoidance of disease. So if you don't want to get scurvy, you take 90 milligrams a day of vitamin C through food. It's very simple. But if you want optimal skin and optimal collagen and optimal blood vessels and optimal antioxidant immune system, we're going to talk more. And most whole food plant-based eaters eating brightly colored fruits and vegetables get way more than 90 milligrams of vitamin C in their food. And of course, you can supplement if you want to. Vitamin C is one of the strengths of a whole food plant-based diet. We get a lot. But yes, the RDAs are not necessarily enough for optimal health, according to many analyses, and at least my viewpoint.
When you say not enough, could it be that they're too high in some regards and too low in others, maybe?
Generally, the RDAs were designed to avoid disease with the minimum amounts, because they were developed in the 1930s when diet and starvation and calorie content were much more challenging. We have calorie abundance everywhere now, largely, not always. In the United States, largely not always, except so many of those calories are nutrition poor, calorie dense garbage foods that we are teaching and trying to avoid. So usually the RDA is too low, and the vitamin C example is one area of that. For people with cardiovascular disease, 10 times the RDA for vitamin C is actually even a low dose, 900 to 1,000 milligrams a day. You'll reach that if you're eating apples and arugula and grapes and eggplant, a few oranges and cherries. Take a supplement, you'll get even more, but vitamin C is one you usually don't have to supplement. Calcium is controversial right now. What's very clear is you can get all the calcium you need for healthy bones, healthy blood vessels, healthy mineral support through a whole food plant-based diet. You just want to concentrate on dark, rich, leafy greens like Swiss chard, kale, arugula, spinach, and vary them around. I really like to vary my greens. I have some patients get hooked on it's spinach every day by the bagful, and there is some risk of kidney stones. You want to vary them around. It's just better to get the whole broad range. Some people talk about trying to eat 20 to 25 different foods a day and vary them. I don't count, but if you're only buying bags of spinach, you may not achieve that diversity. What's controversial is, do you need to supplement with calcium for bone health? How much do you need to supplement? And it appears that keeping it lower may be better for heart health, that excessive calcium supplementation. Recent research actually shows that high calcium supplements orally, pills, may actually increase the speed of damaging a heart valve called your aortic valve. It's just one recent example. But what we know is when you get calcium from food, that doesn't happen. It's the way you're supposed to get calcium. So yeah, that RDA is easily reachable with just food. And I can't think the last time I actually encouraged any of my patients to supplement with calcium per se. as a pill.
Do people really need to micromanage their calories or even their nutrients?
I personally ascribe to not counting a lot. I don't count calories, I don't count servings, I don't count macros, carbohydrate, fat, and protein. I eat whole foods, colorful foods, as fresh as possible, frozen if I need to be. And I'm going to vary. I'm going to eat grains, and I'm going to eat fruits, I'm going to eat vegetables. I eat a lot of legumes, peas, beans, lentils, some natural soy products like tempeh and edamame. And you vary them around. You get your 10, 12 favorite recipes. You find a restaurant or two that can handle your dietary requirements, and you're all set. You don't sweat it out. You go on vacation, you might do a little research before you go on places where you're going and how to support a healthy diet. You might have a little gem in your community like I'm sitting at right now, one of these plant-based organic carry-out food facilities like we're filming in right now, and you might not even know that it's in your community. Many people don't know that we have Miro right in this city, so it's a great resource. There are people that take a really low-key approach to it. I eat healthy, I take my B12, and I listen to my body. There's no doubt that on a whole food plant-based diet, you average fewer calories a day than on a meat-heavy processed food American diet, on average. You can always, tilt the scale and do it the opposite, but on average. Because the calorie density of leafy greens and fruits and vegetables and grains is just less than meats and dairies and egg yolks and other animal products. So we tend to eat less. We tend to have less of a challenge with obesity. A lot of that has changed with the plant-based processed food industry and the fact you can buy fake pizzas and fake sausages and fake hamburgers and fake everything. And it really has tilted the fat content and the salt content and the calorie content. So you can easily be a 3,500 calorie a day plant eater nowadays, but it's not going to be whole food plant-based. It's going to be more of a junk vegan diet, and you want to watch out for that. But I like the minimalist approach. Eat plants, whole food, colorful foods. Let nature take care of the rest. Works out really well for a lot of people. But you do run into those cases. Doc, I'm doing it and my cholesterol didn't drop. Doc, I'm doing it and my weight didn't drop. Doc, I'm doing it and my blood pressure didn't hit the target I was hoping for. That's when you might dive deep into checking a little bit if they might just be suffering from a nutritional deficiency that can be corrected overnight.
Now, as far as if you're raising children on a whole food plant-based diet, maybe their smaller stomachs might make it a little more challenging. Is that true or not?
I don't counsel children in my clinic. I'm an adult heart doctor. I raised children, some of which are very dedicated whole food plant-based eaters, and they're all very healthy and avoid processed food routinely, so I'm proud of all of them. But it is true, their calorie needs aren't as high, but their plate isn't going to be as chock full of calories and foods, but it works out fine. You easily, you can consult a dietitian, you can consult an online resource, or you can just wing it. But the word there is always diversity and adequate calories with, again, the big four: the fruits, the vegetables, the whole grains, and the beans, peas, lentils, legume family. And if you don't concentrate on just one, you can't feed a kid only tangerines. You got to get some, bean chili and bean stews and some lentil loaves and some really good food into them. They'll do great.
And you raised your children whole food, plant-based?
They're all been raised in a home since I've been at this 45 years, and they're 38 years old and less. They've all been raised in a home that exclusively offered it. Now, they went off to college, they had relationships, and they're all married, and they make their own decision. But their health is superior, and they are eating buckets full. A couple of really great whole food plant-based eating kids, and fun to see that. It's their choice, though. I did not take a authoritarian view that they must do it. It's just they couldn't do it in my house. We weren't bringing in hot dogs into my home.
Now, what about when they went to families or other family members who might not eat this way, or friends' houses? How did you handle those?
Yeah, we let them figure it out. And to this day, I'm not sure what they did. But somehow they gravitated to make the right decision. I think, again, I can only speak to the childhood nutrition aspect from having raised 3 children and now 3 of their spouses, is you put too much pressure and too much restriction and too many no's. They may push back, and also we had a little bit of a relaxed food upbringing rules because it was so clean in the house. I wasn't too worried that they were getting other than great examples at home.
Now, I understand that you're not a pediatrician, but I've heard that as early as age like 10, we're seeing early stages of heart disease in some children.
Yeah, I actually do see people 16 and up, and sometimes have an opportunity to actually look at arteries in people 18 to 20. Certainly also the published research. If you go down south, there's a very famous research trial called the Bogalusa Heart Trial. I think that's Mississippi. And they were looking at ultrasounds of arteries in young people. And there's another research project in the United States from age 18 to I think 40 called the Cardia Research Group. And if you look, you'll find distressingly high percentages of young people already are starting to develop the early stages of plaque. And the best time, I happen to be fortunate, by mistake, I adopted this plant diet at age 18. But if you can have this diet at age 15, 18, 20, 25 and do it the rest of your life, it is really a gift. If you do it 100%, it's really a gift. If you do it 90 to 100%, it's really a gift. Just, if you adopt at age 60, 70, 80, there's always benefit. But if you start this early, you are really building, the most solid foundation for health for your whole life.
About the mechanisms of action, is there anything you'd like to share there, like even in respect to maybe current, maybe new information?
There's new science all the time that supports a whole food plant-based diet more than any other diet. And a lot of it now is about the gut or the GI tract, or if you want a fancy term, the microbiome. And the more we study, how do you keep trillions of bacteria that are largely in your colon at their optimal state? They're our friends. Some people say they run us, we don't run them. And you won't be healthy without a healthy community and population. But when we eat whole food plant-based, we're supplying this microbiome that helps us make vitamins and absorb food and metabolize and avoid illness and avoid toxins. We're supplying them with, fiber. What diet has the richest amount of fiber? And it's obviously the whole food plant-based diet. And phytonutrients, phyto meaning plant in Latin. You obviously can't get plant nutrients in a steak or a hamburger. You got to get them in plants. And maybe one of the most exciting right now is some of the nutrients in pomegranates. Just, you ask about new research, how pomegranates and ellagic acid and something called urocholine A, but these compounds, the science is exploding, how they support this healthy microbiome. One of the most interesting topics, just real quickly, is a research project that's been ongoing for over a decade now at the Cleveland Clinic about a molecule called TMAO. And when you eat meat and egg yolk, you can produce a lot of TMAO by having chemicals in meat, red meat and egg yolk into your gut, broken down, absorbed by the gut lining, altered by bacteria in your gut, and ultimately in your blood shows up this compound. This compound seems to have a lot of adverse effects on healthy hearts. So we don't want a high TMAO level. There's a blood test that I've been drawing on thousands of people, and I tell them your TMAO is optimal. Usually they have a good diet. Your TMAO is super high. Usually they're eating too much red meat and egg yolk, and then when they stop, it goes down. That has proven to be one of the most exciting pathways to look at food, microbiome, gut health, and measurable output, which is this simple blood test, and directly relating to heart health. But it seems to be critically important in the diabetic population, people worried about their brain health, even chronic kidney disease. You do not want a high TMAO level if you can avoid it. So altering your diet right now is the most solid way to achieve that. One of the most fundamental concepts that applies to this choice to eat a whole food plant-based diet was a term that I usually attribute to Andrew Weil, MD, the doctor that looks a bit like Santa Claus out in Arizona, and that's a anti-inflammatory diet. Inflammation, the middle word is flame, fire, immune system on, when it shouldn't be on. You cut your finger, you want your immune system on to heal. You don't want your immune system overactive day after day after day. Can you test for it? You can. In my field, I typically run on my patients 4 or 5 blood tests. I'll just say the most famous one is called high sensitivity C-reactive protein, or CRP. You want to know if you've got excess or optimal inflammation because of your entire lifestyle. It's not just food, but it is food, it's sleep, it's fitness, it's your oral health, it's your skin health, it's your stress level. But if you want to know if you've conquered inflammation, you ask your doctor to draw a easily obtainable high sensitivity CRP level. What we know about the food part of that, you still got to go to the dentist to get that part checked out. The food part of it is that a whole food plant-based diet is a very anti-inflammatory diet. We know this in a bunch of different ways, but there was a randomized study in heart patients at New York University about 4 years ago, where they took heart patients and put them on a healthy diet or the best diet, the whole food plant-based diet. And what they found was, even compared to the American Heart Association healthy diet, after I think 12 or 16 weeks, the high sensitivity C-reactive protein fell when they put them on a whole food plant-based diet. It's the most anti-inflammatory diet, which is the best choice if you want to avoid or treat or reverse your heart disease that you know you have. There's another fascinating study from, I think it's University of Pittsburgh, and Dr. Stephen O'Keefe, where they took people for just 14 days that were living in inner city Pittsburgh, and they fed them like people living in the bush of South Africa. Really, really simple plant-based diet for 2 weeks. And they actually did the same thing in South Africa. They fed them the garbage food that's often found in inner city urban Pittsburgh. Within 2 weeks is my point. When you go from a junk diet to a whole food diet with rich in prebiotics, probiotics, postbiotics, fiber, there was a massive increase in gut health, microbiome health, TMAO levels. And when you take your healthy, natural, bush-type diet and you make it a processed food inner city urban diet, all the fast food restaurants you see in any inner city in the country, sadly, you quickly destroy the health of your gut and your balance. Now, you can bring it back by staying on the whole food plant-based diet. So the science about inflammation and the science of lowering to an optimal level inflammation with a whole food plant-based diet. WIFABIB, we don't use that term enough, whole food plant-based, some people call it the WIFABIB diet. You can share that, that's kind of fun. Anyways, there's no doubt about it, and it's really, really important. Lead an anti-inflammatory life.
Now, some people act like nuts and oils are like super dangerous. What are your thoughts on nuts and oils?
Here you go, gonna jump right into the controversy. Let's talk about nuts and seeds. I'll just give you a little piece of science that came out just in the last couple months. The Gates Foundation has been funding for 20 years something called the Global Burden of Disease Study. It's a massive worldwide study that involves nutrition and other aspects of health and survival. 190 countries involving tens and tens of millions of people. They published a really interesting analysis recently. Top 3 foods to promote life. Sometimes predicted to extend life 8 to 10 years by eating these 3 top foods. Whole grains, legumes, nuts and seeds. Is that the only time nuts and seeds has shown up top 3? The lowest 2 were processed meats and red meats in general. Those are the ones that shorten. But the top 3 around the world, all these different cultures, all these different backgrounds, were whole grains, legumes, and nuts and seeds. Pretty hard to argue with. And then we have already mentioned omega-3. I encourage my patients, eat raw walnuts. Maybe you want a couple raw Brazil nuts a week to get a little extra selenium. Maybe you want to vary it around because, frankly, in general, nuts have been found to be pretty healthy and pretty cardiovascular healthy. Now, we're not talking, sugar-coated nuts, and we're not talking honey-coated nuts, and we're not talking bags and bags of them. But if I'm having a salad, you'll probably see 3, 4, 5, 6 half walnuts on top of a salad that I'm eating. And of course, if you're not allergic, you can't. But don't give up on seeds, pumpkin seeds, sesame seeds, sunflower seeds. A lot of them have a lot of what are called plant sterols naturally that lower cholesterol. So seeds are great, they're amazing. When you get to oils, it's a food fight. If you go back to Animal House and that movie, if you recall, there was plenty of reason a lot of really esteemed mentors of mine gave oils. Let's just stick with extra virgin olive oil in a dark glass bottle right off a farm in Greece. Gave it a reputation that might actually be a detriment to cardiovascular health, heart health. And there were observations that suggest that could be the case. Studies that were done were small, usually volunteers that were healthy, sometimes people with cardiovascular disease. We've recently been blown away, however. There's a gigantic study out of Spain called Cardioprev study. Look it up, multiple publications. This is high science. 1,002 heart patients, not healthy volunteers, heart patients, given a 7-year program with a very high extra virgin olive oil Mediterranean diet, or the other group, I wouldn't call it a low-fat group, but they were on a low-oil diet, and they were supposed to increase their complex carbohydrates like legumes and whole grains that we always recommend. Who did best with the most sophisticated scientific look at their blood work, their carotid artery health, and their actual risk of stroke and heart attack? I hate to tell everybody, but the Cardioprev study showed the high extra virgin olive oil arm of the group was powerfully enhanced in terms of healthy outcomes. They actually had to stop the study early because so many more people in the extra virgin olive oil group were having events that they didn't want to deny them the alternative diet. Now, that's controversial in our community. I report science. Everybody can look up CORDIOPREV, CardioPrev, series of studies. I find them very, very compelling. So I have liberalized my approach strictly for extra virgin olive oil, not to fry with, not to cook with, a couple drops on a salad, a couple drops on grilled vegetables. I find it perfectly okay for vast majority of my cardiac patients.
Is there any reason at all anybody needs to eat animals when they have access to otherwise healthier plant-based?
As far as we know, there's just so many examples of millions of people that have supported their health for their entire life, for decades of their life, never touching any animal product. I'm one of them. I mean, I'm 4+ decades, and I'm proud to say in my 60s in exceptionally good health. Do you encounter people? I mean, do you ridicule people, or do you keep an open mind when people say, "Doc, I tried, I did it, I truly went 3 months, 6 months, 12 months, 3 years, 5 years, and I just didn't feel good. I developed a condition." Now you got to look at the whole range of possibilities. There's 80,000 industrial toxins in our food chain you have to consider, and that number is growing, and air pollution and water quality and their life stress and their previous trauma and toxicity and their dental health and their fitness and their sleep. And a disease or a ill feeling may be coming from all those areas that are not nutrition. But is there ever a person that reports, when I added back fish twice a week or whatever else the answer was, they report they feel better? I'm a doctor. I talk to patients. I have to listen. I have to honor. I have to respect, not ridicule. Do I think the science strongly supports that we know why that is, or how that is, or what is it about their genetics or their microbiome or their nutrition that led them to report it? Is it actually something that you can verify, or is it just their experience? I mean, an anecdote, not one that can be laughed at, though. So we've never done that kind of science. Let's take 1,000 people, 500 people, 100 people, put them on a 100% whole food plant-based diet and see how many people fall off for medical reasons. Some people might fall off for food addiction and family pressure and spouse pressure reasons, but for medical reasons, nobody really knows the answer. I think, nearly 100% of people would thrive on this colorful rainbow fruit, vegetable, whole grain, legume strong diet, as clean and fresh and colorful as possible.
Yeah, some people are claiming they are having success going keto, carnivore, or all that.
There's a lot of ways to eat better than the standard American diet. There's a lot of ways to eat better than the crap, calorie-rich and processed food diet that so many of our children and adults are eating, our military. So when you're coming from that and you go to a paleo diet that's stressing cleaner, fresher, food choices that include animal foods for sure, even the crazy all meat or largely all meat carnivore diet. I mean, it's conceivable that something's better than the worst diet ever designed in the world, which is the Western diet, the American diet. So it's conceivable that people would report they feel better. I mean, I keep close tabs on the science, and for every 10 articles, 20 articles that come out supporting various aspects of whole food plant-based diet, for heart disease, for cancer support, for brain health, for joint health, for diabetic support, for weight, for inflammation, you struggle to find any scientific report, certainly in the carnivore diet world, forget about it. Paleo, not so much either. The Mediterranean diet, which does advise reducing red meat and eating oily fish and a lot of fruits, vegetables, nuts, seeds, and extra virgin olive oil, has so much support, you can't discount that. We just choose to leave a couple things off the Mediterranean diet plate, like the animal foods like fish and the scant amount of dairy they might leave on the plate. So there's more similarities and differences between a well-done Mediterranean diet and a whole food plant-based diet that we eat, particularly if you allow extra virgin olive oil on your whole food plant-based plate like the Mediterranean diet teaches.
Now, you mentioned fish, which makes me think of the Adventist, I think it was the Adventist 2 study or whatever, that showed that pescatarians might live a little longer than the vegans. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, there was that famous study about a decade ago, a database study from the Adventist Health experience, a very large experience, that suggested a plant diet with a little fish had some mortality advantage during the period of the study than those that claim they were vegan only. It's a database study. There's always questions about the accuracy of the reporting. But that's what was reported. It gets back to the question of test, not guess. What were the omega-3 content of the diet of the whole food plant-based eaters? Were they eating enough ground flaxseed, chia seed, hemp or walnuts, leafy greens? Did they ever have access to a blood test to see if they were deficient? Would they have done better? These are questions we don't know the answers. There are some nutritional experts that can't be discounted, like Dr. Walter Longo, the founder of the 5-day fasting mimicking diet, the longevity diet, professor at the Keck School of Medicine, University of Southern California, Los Angeles. And amazingly, for probably the most prominent nutritional scientist in the world, he's talking about 19 meals a week that are whole food plant-based. His own diet is very rich in legumes and vegetables and whole grains. I know his diet in detail. He includes 1 or 2 servings of fish a week in his own diet and discusses why he does that. That's a small compromise by a leading scientist. So, I tell my people, even the world's leading scientist is on board with what we're doing, 19 to 21 meals a week, if you're eating 3 meals a day. I guess the big debate is the last 2, and I'm very happy with a stir fry with some organic tofu or tempeh in it. That's not a traditional Italian food that Dr. Longo would gravitate to, and I see sometimes his argument you should kind of follow the foods that are the tradition from where your people come from, and I'm not Japanese either, so tofu wasn't on my grandparents' plate, but it seems to be a great food and I digest it well. So I think there's that small room for scientific debate, but they're all clean, and again, my vote has long time been whole food plant-based exclusively.
Is saturated fat still considered a contributing factor to heart disease?
We can debate a bit what whole food plant-based diet and extra virgin olive oil, always bad for everybody or not. Saturated fat, nothing really has changed to question that it has a role to play in developing cardiovascular disease. This is science that goes back at least to the 1950s, literally hundreds, if not by now thousands of studies. Every serious health organization internationally and in the United States advises restricting saturated fat. Some say less than 10% of calories, some say less than 6 to 7%. At times, the American Heart Association has said as low as possible saturated fat intake. And where do you find saturated fat? You find it almost exclusively in animal foods. Animals that have a liver, of course you're not going to find a plant that has a liver. And you're going to find it in the dairy and the meats and the egg yolks and in the fatty cuts for sure. There are a couple of precautionary plant-based foods, palm oil, coconut oil. Particularly, there's a small amount of saturated fat in olives and olive oil, a small amount of saturated fat in avocados, but most of the studies, even with olives, avocados, and extra virgin olive oil, have more data supporting their healthy role in the diet than any adverse effect. If you want to get your saturated fat content down to the very lowest, then some heart patients should shoot for that goal, and those couple of plant-based foods you clearly want to limit or avoid. Why saturated fat will raise your LDL cholesterol. Now, there's variability between you and me and other people, but in general, hundreds of studies. And in fact, there's a very famous analysis that looks at, I think, close to 400 studies combined. Raise the saturated fat in the diet, you're going to raise the LDL cholesterol. It's almost like a straight line. Very strong science. So what's happening to people that are doing carnivore diets, paleo diets, meat-heavy diets? I mean, they're getting a lot of saturated fat. And we focus much more on restricting saturated fat than restricting cholesterol. The amount of saturated fat the average American eats is many-fold more than the amount of cholesterol they eat. So just numerically, it's a much bigger deal.
Okay, but there's different kind of saturated fats, long chain, medium chains. Did they account for that when they're doing this research?
It is possible, mainly in the lab setting, not in your choosing your diet setting, to talk about different kinds of saturated fats, long chain, medium chain, for example. The food industry and some of the biohackers and nutrition experts have focused on the fact that maybe medium chain triglyceride, MCT, sources of saturated fat aren't as harmful. You can buy purified, called C8 MCT oils or powders that are claimed to be supporting the data is not strong. And again, when food studies are done, we're not talking purified powders you're buying in health food stores. We're talking when you look at food, what people are eating. People are eating powders. People are eating steaks and chicken and fish and pork and turkey and eggs and cheeses and whole milks and ice cream by the bucketful. That's not medium chain triglyceride short. What America's eating is a boatload of 16 chain, usually saturated fat. So you don't have to be a biochemist to be healthy. You don't need to worry about a lot of this stuff. Eat the rainbow food plate that was put out by Dr. Neil Barnard, I think in 2009, a long time ago. Fruits, vegetables, whole grains, and legumes, and it's pretty much been adopted universally as a great example.
Omega-3s, is it a good idea to get tested to see what your index is and what's the best test and like what should it be at, 4, 14?
Yeah, we talk a lot about fats, but it's important that people know the only fat that the body needs that it can't make is omega-3 fatty acids. And you hear the terms EPA, DHA, there's another one called DPA. The body needs those, the brain needs those, the cholesterol mechanism system needs those. Your joints, your eyes need omega-3. You can get them from plant-based sources. You can get them from the seeds and the nuts that we've talked about, the walnuts, and 2 tablespoons a day of ground flaxseed. That's as a recommendation I give to all my patients. Chia seeds, hemp hearts, wonderful new source of omega-3. Leafy greens, wonderful new source. For many people that focus on that simple habit, 2 tablespoons a day of ground flaxseed, they're all set. There is some variability how efficient our bodies are at converting those sources over to the end product, what the brain ultimately needs, EPA, DHA. So if you do wonder how you're doing, or maybe you got a little brain fog, or you just don't feel your best, there is a blood test. There's 2 versions, one called Omega Check, one's called the Omega Index. I use the one in my clinic out of Quest Labs called the Omega Index. Largest lab company in America offers it, and all the others do. You can just order it on your own online if you go to some of the lab companies that let you do that. In my lab, the normal value is 5.5% or higher. Some people think the optimal is 8% or higher. But some of my patients, they're down in the 1%, 1.5%. They're really, 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 really low. And these are meat eaters, these are chicken eaters, these are garbage eaters, and some of them are plant eaters. So I solved the problem. I just take a nice plant-based multivitamin that has omega-3 built right in from algae, so it's plant-based. But if you're not doing something like that and you're kind of a purist, it's B12 and nothing else, you might consider checking it out, or at least being sure you get the foods.
So you don't worry about the end product, some backup along the metabolic pathway, like if you take these supplements? Because some of these doctors like Sabatino and Goldhammer, they mention like they're kind of against it.
There's areas of science we don't know enough about. I mean, in the world of cardiovascular health, supplementing with omega-3 fatty acids, EPA, DHA, in their finished final form, has been studied, again, hundreds if not thousands of times, and the bulk of the evidence supports there's more health advantage than disadvantage for heart patients. Those are usually fish oil studies. There's very few that have been done with algal oil, or even with the foods, with 2 tablespoons a day of ground flaxseed hemp hearts that I've mentioned many times. Can there ever be a possible theoretical disadvantage to giving the body the end product? There is. There's a theory on it. There's very little actual science that it's harmful to flood the body. So you might choose not to take, if you're taking a vegan omega-3 supplement capsule, you might not want to take the whole bottle. You might want to take, originally these were about 250 milligrams. Now many of them are 500 to 750 milligrams. That may be enough, and just emphasize the foods. But there's areas we've never had a large plant-based study of any kind randomizing people to getting their blood checked for omega-3, and some supplementing with food and some supplementing with vegan supplements. It'd be an interesting study. I don't see it coming down the road. So work with somebody that knows what they're doing and maybe get tested.
And then supplement like as frequent as you would eat fish, maybe just 2 times a week or like every day? How often do you supplement that?
Is it proven that supplementing with a vegan omega-3 is a benefit in a large study? No, not been done. We do know there's small studies that you can raise your blood level with vegan omega-3 supplements. You can raise your blood levels of omega-3 fatty acids with flaxseed, chia, hemp. just do something. Generally, my patients take omega-3 supplements if they need to, if they have cardiovascular disease, high triglycerides, blood pressure issues, or very low blood tests. They do it on a daily basis typically.
And then last thing about fat, it's my understanding that a fat vegan is different than a fat non-vegan. Is it potentially not as dangerous?
I'm not aware of any data that you take a person with a BMI of 35, which falls in obesity range, and one is a whole food plant-based eater that just has maintained a higher body weight, and one is a standard American diet, that the obesity is less risky in the whole food plant-based eater. I'm unaware of any data. I mean, their food source may be better unless they're eating more of a vegan processed garbage option of a plant diet. It's the excessive visceral fat, adipose tissue, driving inflammation, driving hormone imbalance, driving insulin resistance that one would anticipate would be the same, but I'm unaware of there actually being any research to scientifically answer it for sure. Not every vegan gets skinny, and it frustrates a lot of them. As I say, there's a lot of stresses on the weight of everybody in Western civilization, and food is the biggest part, but it's not the only part.
Well, let's talk about sex. Don't you have a book on that?
I have written chapters in a number of books and have written many papers talking about the aspects of nutrition and sexual function. It's human life. It's sometimes reason people come to my clinic. It's sometimes one of the most frustrating things they have. Of course, we know more in the science world about male sexual health than understanding the role of nutrition. And female sexual health undoubtedly plays a role for both. But there's no doubt that eating a clean, whole food, plant-based diet supports healthy arteries, healthy blood flow, supports the most nitric oxide production, NO, in blood vessels. If you want to say yes, 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 you got to have a lot of no nitric oxide. And we know there's certain foods in particular, like leafy greens like arugula, like watermelon that gives you a lot of citrulline, things that help support beets that give you something called betaine, all which we actually know the biochemistry of how they support nitric oxide production. You want to keep the flag up and the flagpole rising, you adopt a whole food plant-based diet. It works, it's true, the science is known. And it's an important message because sometimes people care less about their heart, their brain, their cancer risk, but you talk to them about the sexual angle, men and women both. And the earlier in life you start, the better, but at any age there's still hope. And then you go beyond it, and we talk in prostate health and prostate cancer risk and ovarian and uterine cancer risk, and all the sexual organs are all supported by a healthy whole food plant-based diet.
And chewing up your food good, that also helps, right? With the nitric oxide, as opposed to like maybe a smoothie.
Back in the 1980s, there was a massive worldwide hunt to figure out what nitric oxide was, and it had other names, and there ended up being 3 big research groups that really were focused like a laser beam. And ultimately, it was decided to call the molecule nitric oxide the molecule of the year in 1992. Nobel Prize winning science. Originally, the thought was our arteries throughout the body make their own nitric oxide if you're not beating up the arteries with cheeseburgers and milkshakes and french fries and cigarettes and poor exercise programs. The arteries make nitric oxide. Very cool. And that's where we learned about arginine and citrulline, foods that help support the artery's own production of nitric oxide. A little later, we learned there's a second way, and it's through dietary nitrates, food. Eat some leafy greens, chew some beets, eat healthy food and chew them slowly and gradually, and they'll interact with bacteria on your tongue if you don't Listerine and Scope and antibiotic mouthwash up your mouth too regularly. And you can make nitric oxide directly through that system that'll get into your GI tract. So there's a second pathway. And they're both supported by eating these healthy, colorful, rainbow diet, plant diets.
Does that mean it's better to probably like chew your food than have a smoothie most of the time at least?
My smoothies I call chewies. I do make smoothies. I just don't run the blender very long. Yeah. And there's usually a lot of ground flaxseed, chia, hemp, walnuts. So there's a lot of substance to it. And literally it's half food, half smoothie, so you have to chew it a little bit. It's a good habit. There is a backup plan. Even a person drinking down a green berry smoothie without much chewing going on has a backup mechanism that's fascinating that will allow them to get all the benefits of that food choice.
Now, you have some books and stuff. How can people find out more about you and maybe learn more from you?
Yeah, I've been all over the place. Some of you may know I've actually been involved in some of the biggest food debates online. Back in 2018 on Joe Rogan Experience, debating the virtues of the whole food plant-based diet. That's episode 1175. You want to check it out on, I think it's on Spotify. I've debated Dr. Stephen Gundry on aspects of nutrition, the Plant Paradox author, and Paul Saladino, one of the carnivore docs. I'm getting tired of debates. It's no doubt whole food plant-based is the winner. But I have an active practice. I see patients from all over the United States and the world at my clinic in suburban Detroit. Easiest place to find me, other than social media outlets, is drjoelkahn.com, drjoelkahn.com. And it links to my weekly podcast, Heart Doc VIP. It links to my clinic. It links to books and articles that I write all the time. Really have enjoyed having a podcast now. I'm in my 6th year every week, and it's listened to by people all over the world. It's kind of fun.
Cool. And any books in particular that people might grab?
Probably the book that's most resonating with all the great questions we've talked about, and hopefully I've answered, is a book called The Plant-Based Solution. That's available now in paperback. It's available in Audible. It's translated in a number of languages. The Plant-Based Solution.
Do you have a favorite quote you want to share real quick?
Eat food, mostly plants, not too much. Michael Pollan. That always works.
Any last minute encouraging words or anything we didn't cover to close this?
Don't let your fork and spoon dig your grave.